The third project is the guide bracket, and we're going to open up the existing file. And one of the things we need to understand is how to place the first section. Basically, when you start a project, I'll open up a brand new one just to take a look at it. You're going to have your datum planes. And when you look at this particular project here, you're going to notice that it has two flat sides. You want to place the section so that you can use either of these two sides as datum B and C. Datum A will be along the bottom of the part. So whenever you're positioning a part with any CAD system, you want to establish how you're going to sketch it based on the geometric tolerancing of the part. So our purpose here is to take this surface on the side here and the one across here, we'll call it the top, and position it so that it goes into your sketch correctly. So if you're going to be sketching on, I'm going to go back over to my guide bracket, and let's take a look at the very first feature. Edit the definition of it, edit the internal sketch, and sketch view. Now you'll notice here we are sketching on the top datum plane. So let me click over here on our top. So you have your top datum, and that's what you're sketching on. And you're placing it, so here's the front datum plane, and here's the right datum plane. So when we go to our sketch view, you'll notice that we have these two edges along our datum planes rather than the curved edge. So we've actually turned the section a little bit. If we look over here to where the drawing shows it, you'll notice that it's set up a little bit differently. In other words, it's turned when we did it. So you're going to attempt to have the same procedure. You got a multitude of ways to establish it. It's as long as you have the two edges along the datum planes, what quadrant you're going to work in. In this particular case, we worked in our second quadrant when we established this. Now, as far as the sketch goes, we put in a series of lines, we put in an arc, and we also included the rounds here because they're very large, so they went into the first feature. This was a center and ends. Remember, you look at your tangencies. These are the only dimensions that are necessary, and you'll see that this equals. So we have our dimension here, and these three are equal. This radius here is different. So we put all of these rounds in the first section. Now normally you don't do that, but since these are large arcs, that's common practice to add them to the protrusion in this case. And this is our first one, first extrusion. Make sure you have your dimensions in here correctly. These are the only dimensions you're going to need. Nothing else. And normally what I do is when I'm doing my sketch, I actually take and position my dimensions like I would like to see them when I get to a drawing. The drawing dimensions are going to display what the model dimensions are, and those dimensions don't have to be moved if you put them in a nice position in the very beginning. You might have to move a little bit or clean up the dimensions in the drawing. But if you move them off the face of the object, which they're supposed to be anyway, it makes it a little bit cleaner when you get to the drawing mode and you're doing your documentation. I'm going to click on my standard orientation here, go back, and right mouse button OK. I tend to forget this because this has been added in Creo. Certain things come up. You should always get in the habit of taking a look. What else is available here? And a lot of times we say, oh, references is new actually, and OK is new for this version of the PTC CAD software. Old Wildfire did not have certain things in there. It had references, but 4.0 Wildfire did not. So you can click OK, or you can come up all the way up into the ribbon and click OK here. It's going to preview the view for you, preview the feature. And again, here you can click middle mouse button. There's no right mouse button available, but the middle mouse button will finish the feature. And I'm going to drag my insert here up and see what we've done. So this was my very first feature that we did. It establishes a lot. And let's put this into a shaded with edges. Looks a little clearer when you do that. Now remember, I didn't bother to do some things here. I didn't bother to go in and even see what's going on with my model properties. And if you notice here, it says the units are inches, and my material was not defined. And again, you can go and do this to all of them if you wish. I double clicked. I didn't have to click on the arrow. Okay. Close. And under tools, we can go in and again, we can check our model information. And here we see steel, and we see that it's in inches. Close this. I can close that browser in any of two ways. All right, so that was our first feature. Now the second feature that we created here was a offset datum plane. So from the top datum plane, we offset this 0.75. Now we're doing that to establish the floor for this ledge here, right in this area, this. And the reason we're doing that is we're not going to cut from the top down because that would give us a dimension from the top down. We want from the bottom up. In other words, 0.75 is the dimension that we want to have. So we want to remove all the material above that. So that's why we offset the datum plane. And when we were done with that, basically we came and we added an extrude. But this extrude is using the datum plane as the sketch. Okay, and it's cutting up. Obviously it's not going to cut down. We don't want it to cut down. And of course we want to make sure we're cutting in the right direction. Now, what entities are necessary for this? Well, if you look closely here, you can see we have one reference here. We have a reference along the edge here. And then we, of course, have our two references here, which come up as defaults. So we want to go and look at the sketch. Go to Sketch View. And the most important thing here is your references. You can see you have 4 of them. These two are the standard ones that are given to you as the default for this particular view when you're sketching. You can delete them if you want. In this case, we do need them. At least we need one of them. We need the one down here, this reference. And we also added 2 other references. So we added the arc as a reference, and we added the line here, or surface or edge. This is a surface we picked. It'll automatically go to the surface. If you hit your right mouse button, click on it, it'll go underneath and give you another choice. So there's actually 3 or 4 things you could click here. If you want, you can just turn it and click on this and then click on this. And that's what I would normally have done. I would have just had my references and I would have picked this one and this one. Then I would have gone back to my sketch view. Now what do we need here? We need one line to the tangent point and another line. So this is an open section. And that's going to remove all the material in those directions. So it's going to remove the material here and the material in this direction. If you go Control D with your keyboard, it'll go into the selected trimetric view. And if you want that to be an isometric, and it does look better in isometric after you've created one feature, you can go to your options, your model display, and change this to isometric. Click on yes. Oops, I'm sorry, I don't want to save that one. I don't want to save it. I want it to stay in trimetric. For this project, I want to go to isometric, but for the default, I want to keep it in trimetric. So you can see it looks a little bit better. So when we click on OK, it's going to preview. If you forgot to select Remove Material, right mouse button, Remove Material, or select the Remove Material button. You'll see what happens. So you want to have the Remove Material and the arrows pointing in the correct direction. So you get quite a bit done at one time here. Now, the next thing is we put in an axis. And axes are very simple. Under the Model tab, if you pre-select something, then you have fewer clicks in some cases. So if I click on the whole model, or the first feature I should say, and then move my cursor a little bit. So I click on the model, move my cursor, it says, hey, I'm going to pre-select this surface. So I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to click on axis. So the axis will all be created if I do it that way. I'm going to delete that one because I've already got one created. When you have that axis and it's selected already, then that can be used as the next reference for the next feature. I'll turn it. So you can see it's still selected. Now I want a datum plane. Since it's already selected as an axis here, when I click my datum plane to construct it, it's going to go through that axis. But I need another reference. So in this case, I'm going to hold down my control key and I'm going to pick on my right datum plane. Okay, now this says offset. I want this to be parallel. So it's parallel and through the axis. Click OK. And that's what I'm going to use for my sketching plane. So again, since I've just created an extra one, I'm going to delete that one. I think I'll just undo. And I'm going to drag my insert here, and it'll show the datum plane. If I do it one more time, it'll show the extrude. So that extrude cut, I'm going to click on it, right mouse button, edit the definition of it, and here's my section. The model is turned. It's really no big difference how you turn it. So let's select horizontal reference. Let's pick this one, see what happens. There you go. I'll move my dimensions. So see whether or not your dimensions correspond to what it's asking for in the book. See the 1.5, kind of an odd dimension, but that's what it says, and 1.5 for the distance here. So this again is a closed section. That's why it's showing shaded. And I had to put a reference on the edge here. So my references, you can see, I used my axes as a reference right here. I selected also the one along the edge here. That's the surface. And then I had a couple of default ones too, or one default one. Actually, we have DTM here as a reference also. So those references are important. How do you get them? You can turn your model and then select them that way. We know that this needed to be one of the references over here. We needed the edge on the other side. So I just simply picked over here on this one. And the axes. So those are the references we needed. We didn't need one on the bottom here. We can always delete that one. So when you're in the sketch here, you can click on a reference. And I'm going to right mouse button and delete it. Now it says it's used to orient the sketch. So you could really delete it, but it's using for orientation. So I'll leave it like it is because I don't want to turn the sketch again. So again, this is just a simple corner rectangle. Click here and here, and it will lock in. Only 2 dimensions need to be put in there. If your weak dimensions go in incorrectly, and the ones you don't want, then you just add a dimension and the weak dimensions will disappear. Back over here, let's take and round. Now, the round command here is very simple. You're just using the 2 edges here. So click on the model, click on a feature, I should say, right mouse button, move your cursor, click on it, hold down the control key, select again. So now both of those edges are selected. Right mouse button, round edges. And then drag it to the size you want, or type it in. get rid of that one. We'll keep the one I already have modeled. Now the next thing is the holes that we have here. Oh, I'm sorry. The next thing is the large hole. And the large hole is interesting because you want to make sure you cut from a certain direction. You don't want to cut down. You want to cut from the datum plane up. So when we look at our placement here, we see that the top datum plane is the placement, and then the axis is the position here. Now I'm going to remove them all and just do it again. So I want to pick the axis, and then hold down my control key and pick the top datum plane. So it's going to go from here on up. This gives the parent feature as a more early feature in the model. It's a more stable one. I'm not using an existing surface. I'm using an existing datum plane, which was a default that was given to us. And is, of course, through all. The next one is the round on the top. Some people say, well, that maybe is in the wrong position. You can move these. Let's say the round here, you get two rounds, this one and this one. You want to put them closer together. Well, just simply move it. As long as nothing's referencing it, it can be moved. If you want the hole before the round, if you want the hole after the round, just move it in the model tree. Now the next thing is we put in an axis. So I'll do it one way and then I'll show it to you the other way. Basically what we want is an axis down the middle. And whenever you make a circle, Creo will actually create an axis. But when you make a round or an arc solid or surface, it will not give you the axis down the middle. You have to put it there if you want it. Now previously I showed you how to click on something and then use that surface and then click on the axis and it'll put an axis on it. Instead we can start off with the axis tool and then click on the surface. And then you have to click OK. It's basically the same thing. Now since it's still selected, you can see it, I'm going to go and pick the hole tool. And it knows to go along that axis. In other words, that's the first reference. In the placement tab here, you want to hold down your control key to get the next reference. So, and that's going to be on the top. Next, you have to decide what it's going to look like. It's going to be through all. In this particular case, you want a counter bore. So let's click on the standard hole, deselect tapping, add clearance, add a counter bore, and in this case, we have to go back and tell it to be through all again. And we're going to just, whatever, we'll make it, the size doesn't make any difference, and you'll see why. Under the shape tab here, you'll see you have to go in and type in things. I can't remember what the size is, so I'll just give it some basic numbers here. And we have, let's go 0.25, a little bit less here. So here's my hole. And you can see that it's saying that it's going to be a standard close fit. We want to free this value up here. So to do that, I'm simply going to go, now one of the things you can try toggling a few things. Normally what I do, and I'm not sure why it does this, but I just go to a different size. And normally that'll free that field up. I'm going to just leave the size there. So, middle mouse button to finish the feature. It's still highlighted. Now, what I want to do, and I should have done actually, I'm going to go and delete this one. And delete the axes also. When I did this, I actually went in and I created 3 axes in the very beginning. So that I had one down the middle here. And then I created the hole. I'm going to select the hole. And Control C for copy, Control V for paste, and I'm going to select the axes, hold down the Control key, pick the top face. Middle mouse button. It's still selected. Control C, Control V, Again, remember you have to have two references and you have to hold down the control key. And there we have it. Now, if you don't do that, this is what will happen. This is what it's looking for. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to pick my axes. And then people forget to hold down their control key and they pick something else. Well, it's going to move that feature where you tell it to go. You want that axis to be the first reference, but the second reference, hold down the control key, you want to have the starting surface, placement surface on the top. You have to have two references here. It's always good to put the axes in first. Finish that one. And I think with these two, I will delete them. And then roll my model. Now, one of the things you may have noticed is the color on my model here. I'll go into my standard orientation. And let's look at our color choices. We'll go into Appearance Gallery. And this is the color I created. Actually, it started out as being one of the other colors and I edited it. So I'm going to click on it, right mouse button, edit. And we can see here that I changed my color. And you can open this up and choose your color in a different manner. I always forget to do this, but it's available. Find something that you like. Don't make it too dark, and be careful with the colors that you've seen already on the model. On the system. If the arrow of something is a red, or if the selection process is going to give you a certain color, you want to stay away from that color on your model itself. And you want to stay with the pastels. Pastels are more important than anything. You don't want a dark model, but you do want all your models to have a different color than what another model is going to be on an assembly. So if you got 5 models, have 5 colors. And you can use your slide bar. There's lots of stuff you can do with this to fool around. And of course, if you want, you can turn your transparency on a little bit. I always like to do that after the part's done. And of course, you can change your highlighting to anything that you wish also. Like so. Close. Remember to save your part, and in general you probably will be emailing this to your instructor, or you will be uploading it into a course interface system like Moodle or Catalyst. This completes the third project, the guide bracket.